You should all be seeing the 9-layer dirt dish, and you should all be relatively familiar with that. It is the building blocks that put together our soil, that we teach about at the summit. And I'm going to focus on the soil aspect of it in a later webinar. I want you to have this sort of as your base, because we'll go back to it and do the process through the hydroponics and the options that you have. A lot of the core basics of how to grow a plant is the same. It's just the medium has changed, and as a result of the medium, the soil versus the hydroponic setup, the water only, then the a few of the actual structures change in what you're going to use, but the concepts, the reamendments or the nutrient treatments become the same. And with the 9-layer dirt dish that we've created, we have a medium that is acting essentially a battery of resources for the plant to draw on to grow as fast as it can, so that we can crank up the intensity of light and uh, expand the limiting factors as much as possible to allow the cannabis plant to grow at its maximum potential, which is quite impressive. As we're able to increase the weakest link, the genetics of cannabis actually have an increasing ability to have larger yield, and not getting into specific cannabinoids and how they express, but the actual yield that you get from it increases almost at a linear rate with the increase of those resources. Peat moss is your foundation. It's what the roots work its way through. It's the body of the soil. Worm castings is nutrient dense. Fish compost has a lot of phosphorus and easily accessible phosphorus for the plants, which is a key point. And we'll talk about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But that has a lot to do with root growth. Pumice stones give you that aeration so that you don't get an anaerobic environment in the soil. Anaerobic is without air, and that's caused by being bogged down in water, kind of a swamp scenario. We don't want that, and so having that pumice stone allows that excess water to drain away, while at the same time it can hold water like a sponge. And so it keeps it away from the roots, but it actually keeps it available for the roots if the soil was to dry out. It also is a rock, and so has some mineral properties as well. So these ingredients are multiple positives. You've got the rice hulls for the silicon, which, and as well as aeration of the soil, makes it a lighter, fluffier, and prevents it from getting swampy. But the silicon is sort of the added benefit versus using stuff like perlite or something like that. And that silicon allows the stem of the cannabis to grow stronger and more turgid, to be able to bend without breaking. And if we're going to be packing on extra weight because we're trying to create more yield on these branches, and especially after we lollipop and defoliate in order to focus energy going to specific buds on branches, on a limited number of branches, we need that plant to be strong, so that we don't accidentally break under its own weight and lose the crop. And then biochar is great for microbiome, microorganisms to grow inside of it. And the microbiology in living soil is a huge part of what makes it a great option for growing a plant, because that the other organisms that are in that soil are working with the roots of the cannabis plant to help break down nutrients and minerals from a form that's difficult for the plant to take up into something that's easy for the roots to take up. And the easier we can make those nutrients available, the better for it. Um, Sort of in comparison with hydroponics, hydroponics usually has a nutrient concentration that's already in a soluble form and is easy for those roots to absorb. But the microbiology in soil essentially is the mechanism that is doing that, and would compete in its efficiency that way. Then compost starter is actually the microbiology, the actual bacteria and fungi that we want to have growing in that soil. And so even though there's some existing in the ingredients that we bring in, we want to really jumpstart that whole living mechanism and get it up to maximum potential right away. And then the nutrient mix and mineral mix supplies as much of those building blocks that the plant needs to grow as it needs. Now, this part later in the webinar, the nutrient and mineral mix, we will be um, looking into some specific products and things that I know work very well, and some suggestions on what you can use for that. Okay. Then let's go into germination, and if there is if there are any questions in regards to that, drop them in the chat. Anything with the soil, but that's just the essential foundation that we start with. Okay. And so let's go into some specifics about the germination process. So if we're starting from seed, then we have these seeds that are essentially the plant in a dormant state, and we need to bring these plants out of its dormant state into an active growth. And so in order to do that, oftentimes the seeds are waiting for the right conditions that it thinks or or its genetics thinks that it will be able to survive and thrive. And oftentimes this means a moist environment, be it coming out of winter and frozen ice turns into water and then it's available, or in a dry, arid condition, the seed would sit there and it's dry like a desert, and then all of a sudden the water comes in, and that is sort of the trigger. Um, Water and then actually hydrogen peroxide is very important in some of the mechanisms inside of the seed, the actual biology of the seed to start and activate some of these processes. And so we take that cup of RO water, which is gone through your reverse osmosis, and it comes out as pure H2O as you can get. There's nothing in it. It has a very neutral pH. We then put in the hydrogen peroxide, a third of the cup of the hydrogen peroxide. We're talking hydrogen peroxide over the counter at the drugstore kind of stuff. And this helps penetrate the shell and activate the germination, so that you can pop those seeds with a high success rate. Because depending on the genetics that you're buying, to purchase seeds can be expensive, and if you're having a low germination rate, that's money that you're wasting. And then if they're not feminized, and you need to pop several seeds in order to get enough female plants, because the female plants are the ones that create the flower and the bud. That is the main product that we're going after. We don't want the males. So if you're popping them and they're not feminized, you want to have a high success rate so that you're able to pick out the females and discard the males. Um, uh, I'm not even going to get into a pollination program, but so if you're doing that, that means that a portion of those seeds are going to be wasted anyways, and so we want to be as efficient as we possibly can. And then you're going to soak it in that hydrogen peroxide for 24 hours. 24 to 48 hours is really the reality of it. And I'm totally fine with going on the longer end of it. It's not going to hurt anything for it to be in the water. You can then remove the seed and put it in a germination pad, like a paper towel or something like that, soaked in the RO water with the hydrogen peroxide mix, and then put it in a Ziploc bag or in a sealed container of some type that is going to keep that moisture in there and keep that obvious watery environment for that seed to say, okay, this is definitely an environment that is good to start growing in. And then you should start seeing them sprout. And so this top picture is what that first tail looks like coming out of the seed. And then for when I'm planting the seed, if you're doing hydroponics, you might be putting in a rock wool or something like that. If you're doing a soil grow, it's totally fine to grow the seeds and plant them directly into soil. I wouldn't put it directly into the final pot, and we'll go into that for a second. But when you put it in the soil, you want to put it so that it is not tip up, not tip down, but sideways in the soil. And what that does, if you look at that lower left picture, that tail grows out and then it has this natural bend to it. Okay. And that tap root pushes down into the soil and pulls the seed out, or the plant out, and if it's planted sideways, you actually have a much higher rate of that seed pod popping off of the plant and preventing the situation over on the lower right picture, where the seed is actually stuck on the leaf. So you're going to want to get that seed off, and those are very delicate at that phase. So if the soil can do it for you, that's just sort of a little trick that you can use in order to make that part of the process simpler for you. And it's easy. You just put the seed on the ground, and that's how they usually fall. And so that is the germination process. So whether you're putting into the soil or the rock wool, this is where I'm going to be switching from the PowerPoint screen to my web browser. Oops. No. I want to go back to the web browser, so I might be clicking around for a second. But you're going to put the rock wool, or you're going to have the soil medium, be it a pod or something like that, and you're going to soak it in the H2O that is at 5.5 pH, and that is going to be the optimum pH to start with. That is slightly acidic, or reasonably acidic from your RH, or I'm sorry, from your RO water. So if you need to use like a pH down to make it more acidic, then that's the solution. And then you're going to mix in the Clone-X, and that's 400 parts per million for that, and you're going to soak that rock wool for about 30 minutes to make sure that it's fully soaked in. or whatever a growth medium starter pod you want to use. But it's that mixture of the solution, and Clonex is actually a hormone. And so let me switch over to here. Okay, so you should be seeing the Rockwool, just a website where you can get the starter plugs and Rockwool. These are the products that I'm talking about. If you can see that, just chat, put in the chat Rockwool. And it really doesn't matter what kind you get. Perfect. It doesn't matter what kind you get. Everybody will have their own preference on what to work with. You can try different types and see if you like one over the other. Oftentimes, I will just fill a cup, the solo cup that I'm going to use for the first week or two of growth, and I'm going to fill that with potting soil. And so let me get that out of the way. So with the potting soil, sometimes I'll use just a safe potting mix. The main thing is you don't want the to plant the seed directly into a living soil, because the microbiology might actually eat up your seed, right? And you want to have as high success rate as possible. And so you can do something like an all-purpose potting soil. It has regular nutrients in it. Mother Earth is a pretty good um, potting soil, and pretty basic. It's nothing special to me after compared to what we build ourselves, but for this initial start, just get a regular potting soil, or use um, a starter plug, or rock wolf to start that root system. And then I just take a clear solo cup and I fill it with that soil, and I put that clear solo cup in a red solo cup. And the reason I do that is in the clear one, I can see through that and I can see the dirt. And when the seed takes and the roots start growing, I will see the edges as the roots start to get bound. You don't want intense root bind, but you do want a little bit of that. And then you put it in the red solo cup to block the light, and roots will grow away from the light. It won't grow out to the edges, but we do want that to happen. And so let me switch back to my slideshow. Okay, and so from there, I'll transport it into that solo cup for about two to 3 weeks max, for that early veg stage. If you have a a healthy plant and you've got you've got a comprehensive soil medium, 2 weeks you should really see this plant be at about the stage that you see in the picture, 1 to 2 weeks, and you should start seeing those roots coming out towards the edge of the cup. The light intensity that you would have on these plants at this point is going to be about 300 to 400 ppfd. And so a lot of the LED lights that we talked about, full spectrum LED lights is what I would recommend. Cost wise, I was reading an Apogee Lab article about a study that they did, and they did have pretty conclusive evidence that as far as cost wise, it is less expensive using the LEDs versus the high pressure sodium light bulbs. And I really do want to do a little bit more deep dive into the effects of light on a future webinar, especially once people get their grows up and running and are going into maximizing yield. But for the light intensity LED light full spectrum, that early growth period is going to be your 300 to 400 ppfd. Okay. So all those lights have the ability to crank out. I think the ones I was had shown you in the other webinar was somewhere between um, was it 1200 and 1350 ppfd. And so the light intensity would be turned way down, and then you can raise the light up away from these small baby plants and check it with your par meter. And par meters are going to be an important tool so that you don't overwork these baby plants. At this stage, that 2 week period, they're just getting their first their first solar panels out, and it's still a very delicate plant. But from this point, the growth is actually going to be pretty quick. Okay. And so when you start seeing those roots hit the edge of your clear solo cup, then you're going to be ready to transplant it from that cup container into a 5 to 10 gallon fabric pot. And I say 5 to 10 based off of the layout that we did for our grow space. And, you know, if you could put them in 30-gallon pots, that's even better for the ability to grow that plant, a big, healthy plant. But you run into some space constraints. And so your 10-gallon pot is still like a 15-inch diameter. It's a sizable amount of soil, the total volume, and that you start getting some of the benefits of that big battery, so that you don't have to continually amend it every week or so. Whereas in a smaller pot, you're going to have a much more regular amendment process and schedule. We're still going to do that, and I will talk about that a little bit. But the larger pot is going to make that easier. So maintaining the temperature of 75 and the humidity of 75, and you're going to use between 18 to 24 hours of light. Now, to begin early veg stage, you're going to be closer to your 18 hours of light. And this is the part where you're going to need to have eyes on the plants and see how they're responding. If they look stressed, if you're running the lights high and you are running out of water, which is not going to be a big issue early veg, but it could be going later veg into flower, or if you're starting to see nutrient deficiency in the leaves. So if you're using just a regular potting soil, you could see that even in the early veg stage if you have the lights too intense without actually burning the leaves. It might be maybe trying to work harder than what the soil has for it. But with the soil mix that you put together, the way that we're doing it, that initial nutrient availability should be able to keep up and not see that nutrient deficiency on the leaves, which would present itself as yellowing, yellowing of the leaf, either on the inside or around the edges, wilting and droopy branches, that type of thing. That's what you want to be looking out for. And then, but with that, the nutrient solution, we can actually, let's see, go to back out to my browser. Okay, I'm going to hop back out here, and that nutrient solution, and one that actually think would be good to use to start out with, there's nothing bad about it, is it's called Rootwise, and I reference Build a Soil a lot, because I think what the products they have are really top-notch quality, and they really do their research on it, and they make all that research available to you, and it's easy to use and to find high quality ingredients. And so Rootwise is their uh, biological master mix that they put together, and this is a lot of the microbiology that you're going to want to have in there, um, and making that nutrient mix that we started out with and that mineral mix that we started out with, making that stuff highly available to the plants. And then if you look at the ingredients, like, so 85% is diatomaceous earth. And diatomaceous earth is essentially powderized uh, uh, shell. And so it's essentially calcium, a very fine calcium. And calcium's always something that is needed in the soil as our mineral, and then it has 10% beneficial microbes, 3% humates derived from the freshwater humic deposits, and then kelp extract. And so very few ingredients, but all these ingredients are pretty straightforward as far as being good for your plant and providing nutrients and minerals. And so you could read, we can go all day about microbes and the different things that you want to see in a healthy environment, but essentially this is a really good mix for that. And then let's go to we can keep talking about the amendments and other things that you can add into it. And so for the beginning part of this, and I don't think in the initial mineral mix that I talked about, Build a Soil does a soil mix called Take and Bake, and you can order that and have it delivered, and it's essentially this 9-layer dish. That's what I derived a lot of it from, things that I'd learned, and I have a very shared ideology about living soil with what they teach at Build a Soil. And so I don't think the Take and Bake has the Cannabis coots. A gnarly barley is what this product is called. Oops, this one. Come on, show it. I don't know why it's doing that. But anyways, it's Cannabis coots, gnarly barley, and this is a seed sprout tea. And so I actually love the way that they say it. Down in the directions for farm use, at the bottom, they say, 250 pounds, is that too expensive? Check out bulk pricing, but sprout your own local seeds and save money. And that's something else you can kind of take from just the general education here is, look at the things that work, and then you can find ways to do it at a little bit more cost-effective way. And so part of this mix, this gnarly barley mix, you can take a look. You have barley seeds, you have corn seeds, and you have lentil seeds. I believe that's the majority of the mix. But what you can do is actually soak seeds in water and allow it to sprout or to begin sprouting, just like your cannabis seeds, right? It'll look the same way. They'll just start to shoot that taproot out, and then you blend it up Okay, you put it in a blender, you blend it up, and essentially you're extracting all the enzymes that those seeds naturally release that tells the plant to grow. And so by adding this as an amendment and as a sort of a soil starter, just like the Clonex, you're giving signs and you're giving messages to the plant itself to grow and to grow. Don't slow down in your growth, but to start pushing now. And so you're kind of hacking the natural, or you're hacking nature's way of directing the plant, and you're doing it consciously. So I think that's a really cool tool that you can use in order to get some pretty good results from that. So let's go back to the slideshow. Okay. So then you're gonna be in that pot, in that say 10-gallon pot, and you're gonna veg for about 2 weeks until the plant reaches the height that you're looking for, that's bulked out, and roughly a total of 30 days veg, and your light intensity um, is going to be between 500 and 800 ppfd, and you can incrementally increase that over that time period as your plant becomes a little bit more beefy and can handle the root system can handle more. I guess it's kind of a stress being called from the leaves, calling for more nutrients to match the amount of light and photosynthesis that's going on in the upper part of the plant. Okay. And then the picture just shows a general concept in growing plants. You don't want root bind to happen um, and indefinitely, where the roots just ball up and start growing in on themselves. That can cause root rot, especially if the soil is not aerated well. And plants do not like it. It will stunt the growth. But if you allow it to grow out, and this is sort of in that solo cup phase, if you allow it to hit the edges and start to do a little bit of binding, um, that causes stress to the plant, and it mimics something like if the plant was growing next to a rock, right? It can't penetrate the rock, and so it's evolved, it's developed so that when it hits a rock, it tells it to those roots to grow a little bit harder to get around that object. Well, this object is a cup and it's not going to get out of it. It doesn't know that. And so we allow it to stress just a little bit. So just as you see those roots hitting the sides and sort of growing around in on itself, then that's going to be your trigger to pop it out of the cup and into the hole that you dug in your 10-gallon pot with the soil that you built. And from that point, then it still has the signal to grow and to push out. And so those roots no longer has the resistance because you have that nice aerated soil, and those roots grow strong and have a real effective early growth in your veg stage. Okay. Any questions up to that point? All this stuff is things that we've covered before, just with a little bit more detail. And this, I wanted you to see the specific um, uh, microbiology that we're putting into the plant. The uh, sprout tea is a really good trick to stimulate growth, and you can apply that throughout the course of the plant's growth. It doesn't just have to be at the very beginning. Those hormones are kind of just tell it, turn on, go, grow harder. So if you're wanting that plant to grow out beefier, um, or after a stage where you defoliate, that would be a great time to put in um, that that sprout tea that Cannabis coots is just a really good one, really good mix. The way that they've extracted the enzymes. So, um, let's see. I'm not going to get too much into the defoliation just yet. I wanted to cover a few more things on my browser. Let me reorganize a little bit. Oops. Okay. Then a few other things that I would recommend that you add, or really one other major thing is at the very beginning when you've created the soil, and you're starting to put water into it. So when you've mixed up the soil and you have it in your 10-gallon pot, and this could be any time, you could fill those pots anytime during that 1 to 2 week period, or the first 1 to 2 weeks where it's in that solo cup, you're waiting for the roots to hit the edge and need to be transferred. You can be filling those pots up with soil, and then once you're ready to start wetting it down, and so you'll have the process. You'll put the soil in the pot, you'll wet it down the first time, and then the microbiology is going to heat up, and you actually feel the heat in batches of like 10 gallons or more. You actually can put your hand on it and will feel it heat up. It'll heat up for up to from a week up to 2 weeks, and so you want it to cool back down before you actually transplant your plant into that soil. But that's the time period where it's growing in the cup. You get it prepped, and then you can maintain that soil moisture. Nothing is really pulling water out of the soil. So in a 10-gallon pot, you can put, say, a half gallon of water, which would be 5%. Ideally, you're going to get that water percentage up to 10%. But once you have it at that happy moisture level without going over, because that's risk of anaerobic conditions, then you can put something like this. Bavaria bassiana is a actual a fungus that you put in, and it will grow with the plant. You could put it even on as a seed, but I'd say put it in the soil for when it transplants over, and it'll incorporate itself in the plant, and that bacteria or the fungus, it will actually help prevent pests and insects. It will grow on that insect like a fungus, a mushroom, and kill the insects that try to infest the plant. And so that is a really cool defense mechanism that you can throw on to the soil to help prevent those problems from arising in the first place. So I wanted to make sure that you guys have that and understand that. Okay. And then if you are if you're reusing the soil, which if you have a good healthy ecosystem in the soil, you can reuse that soil, and you can reuse it multiple times. And one of the things that you can do in that early soil phase, in order to add nutrients into the soil, you can do this the first time that you mix the soil. The timing wise, if you're trying to do it and time it up with the week or two to have it cool down versus um, the growing in the solo cup, you may not have the time to actually do a cover crop. But a cover crop is a great way to increase uh, uh, the biodiversity in the soil, to create a couple other systems that you can then carry through during the plant's veg and flower phases, where you allow it to actually grow on the very top, and so you use something like a clover mix, okay? Um, and it's all sorts of different types of cover crop seeds that you would plant on, but you would plant it on the top, around the area where you're transplanting your plant into. And you know, low growing clovers, they have flax, lentils, um, millet, a buckwheat, a couple other different types of good cover crops that actually put nutrients into the soil, uh, and and whether it's nitrogen fixation, with a lot of clovers are known for nitrogen fixation, or something else, then those are what you want growing on the top surface. And then when those plants grow up and uh, and are starting to, I guess, compete with your cannabis, you can actually chop them. You can chop and drop them. You can cut them, and then lay them down on the top surface of the soil and create a level of compost. And that level of compost will be decomposed throughout the process, add a little bit extra nutrient into the soil, uh, and and then that's available for the cannabis plant to absorb through the roots and make it a um, stronger. What am I trying to say? Stronger plant. And I'm looking for one last one. Let's see here. Okay, now here is a a craft blend of nutrients or minerals. Um, and I wanted to talk about the three numbers that you see here. These three numbers, these are the most common, or the numbers that you see on pretty much all fertilizers. And what they reference is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And they actually are the percent, um, that each of these are, that makes up the ingredients of what you're putting in. So the number 3 represents the nitrogen. So 3% of it is nitrogen, 5% of it is phosphorus, and 2% of it is potassium. So nitrogen is used, uh, it's considered or thought of as sort of the improving the plant health, or providing nutrients to the plant that's above the soil. So the leaves, the green foliage, is what has the largest demand for nitrogen. And so if you are looking for a fertilizer, because your leaves are looking a little sickly, if there's some yellowing in there, that might be a nitrogen deficiency. And so you would want to have a fertilizer that is higher in nitrogen. Um, and and so you know, this blend is sort of an easy blend that you can have a regular application of, and make sure that it's pretty balanced. But the nitrogen is the 3. So if you're looking for a nitrogen deficiency solution, you want to have a fertilization, or I mean, a fertilizer with a higher first number. Phosphorus, which would be number 5, this is 5% of it, is phosphorus, and that is going to focus predominantly on root health, everything under the soil. And that is root growth. If you're having issues with root rot, or the plant is just not thriving, it's not growing, and it has all the other nutrients, it may be a phosphorus deficiency, because without a solid root structure, you're not going to be able to grow as big of a plant above it. So that is kind of an indication of needing that phosphorus source. And then the last one, the number two, is potassium, and that's thought of as a little bit more about the health of the plant inside the plant, the interior functions of the plant, the cellular function of the plants, and that can present itself in a number of different ways. Um, you know, if you've trimmed or if you defoliated and you're having, you know, cell death around the areas that you cut and you trimmed, you might have trimmed too much and created too much of a stress that's actually damaging the plant. And a phosphorus fertilizer higher in phosphorus may be the way that you want to go with that. And so you can take a look at the ingredients here. You know, kelp, uh, alfalfa, uh, rock phosphate, you know, phosphorus that's going to be in here. Um, the non-GMO soybean meal, malted barley. The basalt, that's one of the ingredients that we put in to begin with. Gypsum and oyster shell. This is actually is part of the initial soil mix, and is something that you can add in um, throughout the growing process. And so those are all different ingredients that you actually see in some other amendments, and you know, good um, to start learning what to be looking for in different ingredients in quality, high quality additives. Because you may not always have, you know, a site like this, or a product specifically like this might be out of stock, and you need to find an alternate solution. That happens all the time, and you can do a little bit of your own research, and if you can find stuff that you can locally source, that's great too, because that then cuts down the cost. And if you have a local provider of any of these nutrients or any of the fertilizers, compost, um, that can be a very effective way to get good, clean, um, a living soil. And and that that was essentially everything that I wanted to cover, and some extra bonus tips as far as the different products that I would happily recommend to anybody that's wanting to, you know, supercharge their soil grows. Hopefully that was helpful. Let me check. We're almost at the end of the hour, but do you guys have any specific questions you want to type in the chat, and I can answer that in regards to um, the soil building, the early growth. Okay, Chaz, you use Build a Soil? Awesome. And how have what's your personal experience with it? I see a lot of hands clapping. I assume that means that little picture of a plant is actually a very big plant. Um, yeah, so the hydroponics, I want to do a separate webinar on the hydroponics, and we will go over that with the nutrients and the process for that. Um, uh, I'm a lot more myself more comfortable talking about the soil grow and the nutrients and the growth process from this frame. And so the actual plant biology is essentially the same in soil and in hydroponics, but the difference is going to be in what actual concentrated nutrients you're going to add to the water, and what structures and processes you use in those hydroponic systems. And so I want to do a separate webinar specifically for that. Okay, cool. Okay, Chaz. So it's your first run. And the Build a Soil website is actually really good. The educational parts of it, the books that they recommend, actually a lot of the different reading material that I used is directly referenced in what they teach as well. So they have some really good tools. And then if you need to talk to me, um, then I actually after the webinar is over, I don't have any more time today, but there is a link in the email that I had sent you uh, to schedule a time with me, and Monday through Fridays regularly, unless something comes up, which today I have something this evening. I am usually available between 8 and 10:30 or 11 p.m. Almost nobody um, sets time later than that, but I make my evenings available to talk to you guys if needed, and definitely let me know through email. And I know your emails are working. Let me know through email if you're having issues with scheduling those phone calls. uh, that should be a new link, updated, ready to go, and we can get rolling again. Um, but yeah, if that's all the questions, uh, I'll stop there. Um, okay. Then if you have any questions and need some clarity, then go ahead and email me, and I can address it through emails. And I might be able to get that like late tonight, that kind of thing, if that's all you need. So yeah, that's the webinar for today. And let me know if there's specific subjects that you want to cover. Hydroponics, I hear you, Dom and Chris. Hydroponics and the nutrients and the procedures to do the hydroponics. I will definitely have that as an upcoming webinar. I want to make sure that that one's pretty solid. I'm also going to be talking to a good friend of mine that's going to have some more specifics and some firsthand tips and experience on that, because soil is my deal, and that's what I know the best. So, okay, then everybody have a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon.